Hey everyone, in the previous tutorial we discussed about truthy falsy values where we understood how we can use different types of values in the Boolean context. But in all the examples we discussed so far, we have been only using a single value like name in this case or items in this case. But what if we want to connect multiple values with logical AND or logical OR operators? If you remember from logical operators tutorial, Python uses a concept called short-circuiting when we have logical AND or logical OR operators. But we only discussed about short-circuiting in the context of pure Boolean values true or false. But the values here are not pure Boolean values, right? So when we use different types of values in the Boolean context, we call them as truthy falsy values. So in this particular video, we are going to learn how short-circuiting works with truthy falsy values. Now what exactly is short-circuiting? It is the process where the evaluation of a logical expression stops as soon as the result is known. For example, let's take these two logical expressions. Here we have four operands A, B, C, D connected with logical OR. Here we have operands A, B, C, D connected with logical AND. First, let's assume these operands A, B, C, D as pure Boolean values, true or false. Then how will short-circuiting work? If you take this expression in which all operands are connected with OR, this expression will be true if at least one of them is true, right? And we know that Python evaluates the expressions from left to right. So while evaluating from left to right, as soon as Python sees a true value, it will simply return that true without evaluating any further. Let's say, for example, while evaluating, it finds out this A value is false. Then it will go to the next operand. Let's assume B is true. Now this is enough for Python to say the overall expression value as true. So it will not evaluate the rest of the operands. It will simply return this true value. Similarly, if you take this expression, here we have logical AND. Now for this expression to be true, all the operands A, B, C, D should be true. If at least one of them is false, the overall expression value becomes false. So while evaluating this expression from left to right, as soon as it sees a false, it simply returns that false without evaluating any further. Let's assume value of A is true, value of B is true. Now it goes to C and let's assume value of C is false. Now this is enough for Python to say that overall expression value is false. So it will simply return this false without evaluating D. So this process where the evaluation stops as soon as the result is known is called short-circuiting. But we have seen that we can use any type of values in the Boolean context, which means these A, B, C, D, they need not be pure Boolean values like true or false. They could be integers, they could be strings, or they could even be lists. And when we use any value in the Boolean context, it is either called a truthy value or a falsy value. In fact, even Boolean value true is also a truthy value. Boolean value false is also a falsy value. We have clearly seen what all values are falsy and what all values are truthy in the previous tutorial. Now, just like in case of pure Boolean values, even in case of truthy falsy values, Python uses short-circuiting. Let's try to understand how that works. Now first let's see short-circuiting of logical OR with truthy falsy values. Let's take this expression. Here we have OP1 or OP2 or OP3 so on till OPN. And assume OP1, OP2 so on till OPN. These are n operands. First, let's see what happens when these operands are pure Boolean values like true or false. So Python executes the expression from left to right. And while evaluating, as soon as it sees a true value, it will simply return the true without evaluating any further. Let's assume OP1 is false, then it will go to OP2. If this is also false, then it will go to OP3. And if this is true, it will simply return this true without evaluating the rest of the operands. And when will this be false? If all these operands are false, then the result will be false, right? Now, if we extend the same concept to truthy falsy values, what happens is Python evaluates the expression from left to right as usual and returns the first truthy value. it need not be a pure boolean true value. It could be any truthy value like a non-zero integer or a non-empty string or a non-empty list. So whenever it sees the first truthy value, it will simply return that value without evaluating any further. And now if all these operands are falsy values, then it returns the value of the last operand. So basically what we need to remember is Python evaluates the expression from left to right, and as soon as it sees any truthy value, it will simply return it. And if everything is falsy value, then it will return the value of the last operand. Now let's see some examples so that you will understand this even better. So let's take this code snippet. Here we have variables a comma b with values 0 and 10. Variable c has this boolean value false. Variable d has this string with value hello, and variable e is this empty list. Now let's see these examples. So here we are printing a or b. So what is the value of this expression? So it evaluates the expression from left to right. So what is the value of a? It is 0. It is a falsy value, right? So it goes to the next operand. So what is the value of b? It is 10, which is truthy value. So it will return the first truthy value it has seen. So this will give you 10. Now let's see the next example. So Python evaluates from left to right. Value of a is 0, which is falsy. So it goes to the next operand, which is d. So d is this string with value hello. So this is a truthy value, right? Only empty string is a falsy value. Non-empty string is a truthy value. So it sees a truthy value, and so it will simply return it without evaluating the rest of the operands. So this will give you hello. Now let's see this example. So value of a is 0, which is falsy. So it goes to the next operand c, whose value is false. False is also falsy value. So it goes to the last operand, value of e. So value of e is this empty list, right? So this is also falsy. So all of them are falsy. So it will return the value of the last operand. So e is this empty list. So we'll get an empty list. Now the last example, a is 0, which is falsy. So it goes to the next operand. C is false, which is also falsy. So it goes to the last operand. D is this non-empty string, which is a truthy value. So it will return the truthy value hello. So the point we need to remember with logical OR is we go from left to right, and as soon as we see any truthy value, that will be the value of the expression. We don't need to evaluate the rest of the operands. And if everything is falsy, we will simply take the value of the last operand. That's all you need to remember. Now let's put these examples in a program and verify. So I've created a Python file truthy_falsy_short-circuiting.py inside the same folder control flow. And I have added a print statement here so that we can use this message as a reference to locate our outputs. So let me run this program, right click, run. And yeah, this is the output. So we got 10 hello, empty list and hello, which is exactly what we have seen before. Now what happens if we apply not to these expressions? Let's say here we have a or c or e, and here we are applying not of this a or c or e. Similarly here we have a or c or d, and we are applying not of a or c or d. So if we run this program, right click, run. So let's see the output. If you remember a or c or e, it gives us empty list, and empty list is a falsy value, right? And we have seen in the truthy falsy value tutorial that not of any falsy value will give you boolean value true. So that's why this will give you true. Similarly, a or c or d will give you this value hello, which is a truthy value, and not of any truthy value will give you a boolean value false. So this will give you false. Now let's see the short circuiting of AND operator with truthy falsy values. Again here we have a similar expression OP1 and OP2 and OP3 so on till OPN. Instead of OR we have AND operator here. Now what happens when all these operands are pure boolean values? In case of pure boolean values true or false, when we have a chain of AND operations, this will be true only when all the operands are true. right? Only when all are true, overall result will be true. But if at least one of them is false, the result will be false. So what happens is Python evaluates the expression from left to right, and as soon as it sees any false, it will simply return it without evaluating any further. Because if at least one of them is false, that's enough to say the overall value will be false. And when will this be true? Only if all the operands are true, then it will return true. Now if we extend this to truthy falsy values, Python evaluates the expression from left to right as usual and returns the first falsy value. And if all operands are truthy, it will return the value of the last operand. So the thing we need to remember in case of AND operator is Python evaluates the expression from left to right. So first it evaluates OP1. Let's assume this is some truthy value. Then it goes to the next operand OP2. Let's assume this is also a truthy value. Next it goes to the next operand OP3. Now let's assume this is a falsy value like some empty string or 0, or could even be Boolean value false. So as soon as it sees the first falsy value, it will simply return that value without evaluating any further. Now if all these operands are truthy, then it will simply return the value of the last operand. That's it. Now let's see some examples for short circuiting of AND operator as well. This is a similar code snippet. We have variables a, b with values 0, 10. Variable c has Boolean value true. D has this string with value hello, and E is this empty list. Now when it comes to A and B, first it evaluates A, which is a falsy value. So it sees the falsy value, so it will simply return that and it will not evaluate any further. So the value of this expression will be 0. Now if you see B and C and D, B is 10, which is a truthy value. So it goes to the next operand C. C is true, which is also a truthy value. So it goes to the next operand D. So D is also a truthy value, right? So all these are truthy values. So it will simply return the value of the last operand D, which is hello. Now if you see this B and C and E, B is 10, which is a truthy value. So it goes to the next. C is true, which is a truthy value. So it goes to the next operand E. E is a falsy value. So as soon as it sees a falsy value, it will simply return that falsy value. So this expression evaluates to an empty list. Now let's see the last expression B and E and D. B is 10, which is a truthy value. So it goes to the next operand E, which is empty list, which is the falsy value. So as soon as it sees the falsy value, it will return that value without evaluating any further. So this will also give you an empty list. Now let's verify these examples as well. So I've added a message here as usual, and let's run this program. Right click, run, and yeah, this is the output we got. So 0, hello, empty list, empty list. That's what we got for these 4 expressions, which is exactly what we have seen here. 0, hello, empty list and empty list. Now in all these examples, we are simply printing the value of these logical expressions using print function. But we generally use these kind of logical expressions while writing if statements. Like in this example, if you see here, we are writing a logical expression by connecting multiple truthy falsy values with logical AND. Let's try to analyze the output of this code. So this is the same example I have taken here. We have 3 variables: name, salary, and profession. So name has this string with value Sachin, salary has this value 50,000, and profession has this string with value engineer. Now if you see this if statement, here we have if name and salary and profession, and here we have an AND operator. Now let's try to evaluate this expression first. So first operand is name, which is a non-empty string, right? So it is a truthy value. So it will go to the next operand, which is salary, and salary is a non-zero integer, right? So this is also a truthy value. So it will go to the next operand, which is profession. Profession is also a non-empty string. This is also a truthy value. So here all these operands are truthy values. So what will be the value of this expression? When all the operands are truthy values, Python will simply return the value of the last operand, right? So the value of this profession is engineer. So the value of this expression becomes engineer. Now this value engineer is a truthy value, right? Because this is a non-empty string. So this will behave like a true. So it will execute the code inside the if block. So it will print employee details are valid. That will be the output. Let's run the program and verify. Right click, run. And as you can see, it prints employee details are valid. All right. Now what happens if this salary is none or zero? Let's take zero. Now what happens? What will be the value of this expression? First is name, which is a truthy value. So it goes to the next operand. So salary is zero. Zero is a falsy value, right? If we have zero or none here, both of them are falsy values. So salary will be a falsy value. And what happens when we have an AND operator? So as soon as it sees a falsy value, which is zero in this case, it will simply return that falsy value without evaluating the rest of the expression, right? So this expression evaluates to zero. Now zero is a falsy value, so it will behave like false. So it will execute the code inside the else block. So it should print employee details are invalid. Let's verify. Right click, run. You can see it prints employee details are invalid. The same is the case if we have name as empty string or even none. Let's take none for example. All right. So let's give salary as some 10,000. All right. Now what happens? First it tries to evaluate the first operand name, which has none value, and none is a falsy value. So as soon as it sees a falsy value, it will simply return it without evaluating further. That's what happens with AND operator, right? So this will evaluate to none, which is a falsy value. So it will behave like a false, and so it will print employee details are invalid. Let's verify again. Right click, run. It prints employee details are invalid. Now we understood how to find the output of this code, but what exactly are we trying to do here? In this code snippet, we are basically checking if employee details are valid, right? Let's say employee has details, name, salary, and profession. Name will be valid when it is a non-empty string. If it is none or empty string, it will be invalid. Similarly, salary will be valid if it is greater than zero. So here in the problem statement, let's assume that the invalid case is when the value is none or zero, right? So if it is none or zero, it will be invalid. And if it is greater than zero, that will be valid. Similarly, profession, it will be valid if it is a non-empty string. If it is none or empty string, this is also invalid. So we want to check if all these details are valid. Generally, how will we do that? First, we check if name is valid by using conditions name not equal to none and length of name greater than zero, right? To check if it is non-empty string. Similarly, to check if salary is valid, we write salary not equal to none and salary greater than zero. In the same way for profession also, we write profession not equal to none and length of profession greater than zero. That's how we generally do it. And then we connect all these conditional checks with AND operator because all of them have to be satisfied to say employee details are valid. That's how we generally do it. But by using truthy falsy values, we can simply write it as if name and salary and profession. Because if any of these values is invalid, like an empty string or none or zero in case of salary, then that will be a falsy value. And if at least one of these values is falsy, the overall result will also be a falsy value. So it will print employee details are invalid. And only in the case where all these values are truthy values, which means if all these values are valid, then this expression will evaluate to a truthy value. And so it will print employee details are valid. So that's how we can check if the employee details are valid with this very simple expression using the concept of truthy falsy values. And let me tell you one more point. So here if salary is negative, like -10 or -20, even that will be a truthy value, right? Because only numerical zeros are falsy values. And any other numerical value, be it negative or positive, it will be a truthy value. Then you might ask me, even if salary is negative, this expression will consider that as a valid detail, right? But the point to note here is, as per the problem statement, we are assuming that the invalid case for salary is none or zero. We are not expecting any negative values. And the valid case is when the value is greater than zero. That's why we don't have a problem here. But if this is not given, then you might have to write one extra condition that and salary greater than zero. All right. So everything depends on the problem statement. So it's very important that you clearly understand the requirement of the program. All right. Now, what is the advantage of short circuiting? Let's assume the value of name is none, right? So what happens now? It tries to execute this expression from left to right. So first it sees this name. It has none value, which is a falsy value. So it will directly return the none value without evaluating the rest of the operands. Because if one of the values is invalid, that is enough to say that employee details are invalid. So it will save the computation time of evaluating these two expressions. It might not seem very clear to you in this example because we are directly using these variables salary and profession. But assume that instead of a variable, we might have a very complex expression here, which will evaluate to some integer. Or let's assume the data might be coming from a database. So we might have a function call here, which will retrieve the data from the database. Now, if the name is none, it is enough to say employee details are invalid. So Python need not evaluate these expressions or function calls. I hope now you understood the advantage of short circuiting. Now that we understood the concept of short circuiting with truthy falsy values, in the next video we are going to discuss a very important and interesting concepts related to it, which are how to write safe conditional checks and how to implement fallback pattern with short circuiting. Let's discuss these in the next video.